Bum,
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 ba-da-dum, bum,
bum,
bum.
bum.
Bring. It's a busy Thursday, Bendy, here on the Blue Review. Welcome, everybody, presented by LAX. I am Marcus Grant, joined by Greg Bergman and Parker Bell, and a special guest today from the Athletic Dodger beat writer, Fabian Ardaya. Had him on the show last year, wanted to bring him back because a little bit of news has happened. Fabian, man, thanks for coming by. How are you?
I'm good. Just been a little bit busy, but it's been good.
Yeah, just
a few
tiny
things.
little bit. Just a
Two
tiny
things.
little bit.
One thing that I just found out about is that Fabian and Marcus are connected in a little bit of ways here. We're talking about it off the air a little bit. Marcus, you know Fabian's wife, Kendall.
Yes, correct. You put it in a sort of unsavory way, but yes, she and I are co-workers, and one of the little side hustles I have working for working. Yeah, I work at one of my side hustles working at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life, where Kendall does a great job hosting shows, videos, the whole deal. And yes, she is married to Fabian Ardaya. So, that's not the reason we want to have Fabian on. I want to talk about a whole lot of things going on with the ball club. But before we dive into any of that, I want to give a shout out to the folks at LAX. They are transforming the travel experience. They are trying to save guests time. People Mover train on the way, hopefully up and running by early next year, which will hopefully make everything better for a lot of folks going in and out of Los Angeles International Airport, including our own friend Fabian Ardaya here. For more information, you can find that online at flylax.com/transforminglax. So, Fabian, might as well get started with the big news that I think caught a lot of people by surprise yesterday. The Dodgers designate Austin Barnes for assignment, ending his 11-year run with the ball club, and they call up the top prospect Dalton rushing. So, just the overview. What was the kind of the deciding factor? And what I think caught a lot of people off guard yesterday, seeing Austin Barnes let go.
Yeah, I feel like the logic behind it kind of always made sense. It was always kind of seen as like this was something that's going to happen eventually. I think on both cases, especially with this being Barnes' last year of the contract. But I think the timing was maybe a little bit of a surprise. Just like, why now? I think even Dave Roberts was saying like this came together really quickly. Like, they're trying to figure out the best way to go forward. There's probably a lot of factors there. One of them probably also being Will Smith. You want to keep him fresh. I think they've made more of a concerted effort to maybe give him days off this year. And if you're going to do that, you really want to make sure that your backup is really producing, especially offensively. And Dalton rushing, obviously, is more prepared to do that at this point than Austin Barnes is. Doesn't make it an easy decision. I think that was kind of the universal thing kind of throughout yesterday. It's like, all right, this is a guy who has been your longest tenure position player. Max Muncy called him a pillar at the clubhouse. Like, this is a guy who has been around since before Dave Roberts even took the job. So, like, this is makes it a little bit difficult for a lot of senses. But I think in a pure baseball production standpoint, like, this is something that has been forecasted for a while. Dalton rushing has kept producing. Like, he is the kind of definition of like banging down the door for the big leagues with how he's produced. And I think now is sort of the time, and they sort of feel like this is a time to still kind of develop Dalton rushing, because if he's going to be playing just a couple times a week, they're going to spend the rest of that time kind of getting him ready, getting him in meetings, catching bullpens, doing all the little things that Will Smith did before he even debuted when he sort of did that internship in September 2018. So you're kind of hoping to get the best of both worlds there.
So then it was a little bit of like the timing is weird for me too, because you were talking about it. Kershaw is coming back on Saturday, and Kershaw has always had, I understand where he is in his career, but he's always had kind of a personal catcher. It was AJ Ellis, and then it was Austin Barnes, and Barnes has been that guy for a long time. Do you think that when he was down in AAA, I know it's just a couple, maybe the last outing or the outing before in AAA, he had Dalton rushing catch him? And do you think that because they worked and he said that they worked well together, that was kind of the impetus to really kind of say, okay, he can work with Kershaw, so we're going to just kind of let him go?
I don't think that was like the final straw or anything like that. I think it was maybe the coincidental timing that this is happening right before Clayton Kershaw is coming back. But I do think that they've kind of tried to veer away from Kershaw sticking to one catcher for the last couple of years. They've had Will Smith catch him a little bit more frequently. And I think he's comfortable with Will Smith. And obviously, Dalton Rushing was kind of talking about it yesterday, like just what's it like sort of developing game planning and stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, like you feel like you have your process or anything like that. And then you show up one day and trying to go into a game planning meeting, and there's Clayton Kershaw. Like, I don't know what I'm going to tell him, but this is something that we're just kind of figuring it out on the fly there.
So, Fabian, I was reading your article that everybody in the chat and everybody watching can find on The Athletic. Dalton, you were mentioning that he's strictly going to be behind the plate. They've been refining his defensive prowess back there so that he can be the legit backup. But is there any chance for any of the listeners who don't know Dalton all that well that they may see him elsewhere around the field, especially when the Dodgers have all these injuries?
I don't think for right now. I think the plan for right now is to get him in the big league infrastructure, have him kind of work on the game planning part of it, catching bullpens, everything like that, starting twice a week and being available as a lefty off the bench to pinch hit, just because they haven't really had a lot of that this year. I think their bench has been really right-handed. You're right. He has played some first base. He has DH'd. Those are two positions that are famously pretty blocked for the Dodgers. And then last August and September, they tried having him play left field. I think that was mostly in case of, hey, we need a bat in the playoffs. This is your way onto the roster. Obviously, he's played a couple games this year. I just don't see it happening just with how the roster is constructed. It would make it kind of for an awkward fit anyways. So, yeah, he's kind of forced into being behind the plate with how things are set up. Maybe he can make it to 2 to 3 times a week instead of 2 times a week. But I think the plan for right now is kind of just having him get comfortable in the big leagues, get in a position where he's going to still not take as many at-bats, but get some at-bats at the big league level and kind of mold him into maybe 1A, 1B situation with your franchise catcher as opposed to maybe a pure backup. I think that's maybe the best case scenario there.
I was going to ask about that too, because for this year, obviously we know Will Smith's going to get the bulk of the playing time, but we are talking about the number one prospect in the organization here, who is, as you mentioned, at a position that is fairly blocked. I mean, I just wonder, is there a plan beyond, say, this year, 3-4 years down the road? Is it still going to be that Rushing's only playing 2-3 times a week? It just feels like a really tough scenario for the Dodger front office to be in.
I don't think that'll be the case. I think, obviously, you're kind of looking at the roster. Michael Conforto is on a 1-year deal. Maybe there's a pathway to Dalton Rushing getting some more playing time in the outfield. Maybe there is sort of a future where you're kind of trying to figure out different parts around the diamond. Obviously, we know Max Muncy has a club option for next year, but you're sort of trying to figure out third base. Or obviously, Freddie Freeman's not going to be at first base forever. Obviously, he's still under contract for a couple more years. So there's still ways that they can try to always add flexibility with guys, but I think for right now they feel like this is the best way developmentally for Rushing, and also the best overall construction of their team involves having those two guys behind the plate. Obviously, I don't think the Dodgers ever want to be stuck into a certain alignment, and I think that's one of the things that in the future I'm sure they'll be open to.
So there's a little bit there's an old guard, new guard kind of thing going on here with the Dodgers, it feels like. And you're starting to find all these guys that were around in 2015, 2016 are starting to just kind of move on past. They're moving now with Austin Barnes now gone. A lot of people, especially in this chat, and I know we've all been kind of CT3 has kind of gone up and down. He has been getting a couple of hits recently. Muncy has been struggling. He had the home run last night, but he has been struggling. And you talked about the club option next year. Are we starting to see that maybe they could be starting to bring up other guys, like could it Alex Freeland or somebody else be coming up and be forcing some of those old guard guys out sooner rather than later?
I think so. Phasing out the old guard, we already kind of saw this a little bit with Justin Turner leaving, guys like that. I think a lot of that generation is kind of come and gone. Obviously, there are holdovers like the Chris Taylors, the Clayton Kershaws, the Max Muncies, but I think at this point, we're looking at a lot of these guys haven't been on the team since 2019. And I think the fourth longest tenured position player now is Will Smith, which is crazy to think about because he was
right.
He debuted in 2019. I obviously Alex Freeland has done a great job kind of knocking on the door. Hae-Sung Kim's guy, who's kind of not a pure homegrown guy, but kind of fits that kind of mold. I do think that there is something to they're going to give veterans some runway when it comes to figuring things out. I think Max Muncy's a guy that they've given a lot of runway to, and they're going to, just considering how affordable that club option is for next year, the kind of steal of contract he's on. I think that's the big thing with him. He is on such a steal of a contract that it makes all the sense in the world for the Dodgers to kind of just give him time to figure things out. Because if he's as good as he was last year in the NLCS during the postseason, like obviously you'll take that. Chris Taylor's in a different kind of situation. He's already in a situation where he's not really playing a whole lot. We'll see how things kind of look in a couple weeks once, or not in a couple weeks, I shouldn't say. I should say maybe probably this time next week, maybe when Teoscar Hernandez and Tommy Edman are probably back. All right, who's the odd man out between Chris Taylor, Miguel Rojas, Ha-Seong Kim, James Outman, all those guys on the roster bubble? Like that'll be an interesting conversation. But yeah, I do think that the Dodgers farm system is maybe producing more fruit that's maybe like ready to produce right now than in the last couple of years, outside of maybe like a Outman or a Michael Busch type. So I do think that there are a couple more of those guys who are really kind of pushing and making these decisions a lot more difficult.
So, Fabian, you mentioned a name in there that has made it and is making an impact already in Ha-Seong Kim.
Yeah.
How high are you there on Kim? The Comet gets his first home run last night, of course, big stuff. Congrats, Ha-Seong, that's awesome. Yeah, how high are you on him, and where does he land? You know, you mentioned there's going to be some carousel moving parts once Edman and Teoscar come back.
Yeah, I think the original plan for him once he came up for Edman was like, all right, he's up for a few days, get his feet wet, go back down to OKC, keep working on the swing adjustments that they've been employing with him. Like, this is a nice little chance to just to reward him for the hard work. I think the swing has looked better than I think people anticipated. I think that's the thing and he has a dynamic that the team really hasn't had in a while. I was asking Dave Roberts that, I think, after that game in Atlanta where he almost tied the game for them single-handedly. And he's like, yeah, maybe like Tim LeCastro was like the last guy who had like that kind of speed and aggressiveness. And like, obviously, Kim's a different kind of profile there. I do think that he's still a guy who it's clear like he's still working through some things in the swing, but like there's a lot more there than I think we're seeing more of the player that maybe the Dodgers envisioned at this point in the big leagues, maybe a little bit sooner than I would have thought seeing him in spring training. Like obviously the swing looks completely different from then. He looks a lot more comfortable. He's definitely a really confident guy. Guys kind of gravitate towards him. He does have options, which is, I think, the thing that kind of is working against him when it comes to this potential roster crunch. But if he's a guy who obviously has versatility, hits left-handed, like these are all things kind of working in his favor and making this decision probably a lot more difficult than people originally envisioned.
Are they still considering getting him some innings in center field? I know we saw that with last week, I believe it was. You know, when Edman comes back, you mentioned the crunch, right? Edman can play second. Kim can play second. Rojas can play second. Are they still going to try to get him some spots in the outfield just to have that insurance policy?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Because you're looking at it like the guys who can play center field on this roster are Andy Pages, Tommy Edman, James Outman if he sticks around, and then Ha-Seong Kim. Like, so you kind of want to have him out there. Obviously, he had the ball kind of hit off his glove last week in Arizona. It seemed like that was a ball that was like difficult for anyone to kind of get to, any kind of center fielder to kind of get to. And the fact that he even got to it kind of is a testament to his kind of athleticism out there. I think it's one of those things where like if he doesn't even get to there, you just sort of see it as a hard double off the bat, anyways. Just because I think it was like 109 off the bat. So like he's a guy who obviously is still new out there, but I think you can see him long term maybe being a fit who can at least in a pinch play some center field. So I do think that's something that they want to keep in his tool bag in a sense.
I want to move over to the pitching just a little bit because Roki Sasaki is now on the IL. He had been struggling, but still had pretty good outings. Like he was going 5 innings. He got to a 6th inning a couple of times. He was not pitching poorly per se, but his numbers would say that they were pretty bad. And also the velocity dropped heavily. So when you see Roki going on the IL, I know how Dave likes to talk about what these injuries are, and we always like to joke around about the phantom ILs. Is there something else that's going on with Roki that is causing this kind of thing? And what are you seeing from him this year too?
I do think that it was something where he said he felt something in his shoulder the last couple of outings. He didn't describe it as pain. It's more just like his shoulder wasn't moving the way it should. And so that's something he felt last year. Not as bad as he felt. Doesn't feel as bad this time as he did last year. but I do feel like it comes at a convenient time for the Dodgers, for his long-term development, for everything, because he kind of needs a reset at this point. I think that's the one thing that's very clear. Like, he does need a reset. He needs a chance to kind of sit down, work through the delivery. There's a lot of things that he needs to work on that be best not in a big league environment. And I think that's going to be something that they're going to spend this time doing, trying to find a way. Obviously, once he gets healthy, trying to find a way to get some more life on the fastball, to find the velocity back in the fastball. Because he wouldn't say strictly like that's the reason that the shoulder is the reason why the velocity dropped. But obviously, the velocity has dropped. Some of it was Dodgers coaches first saying like, "Hey, get this velocity to a stage where you can command it." They were obviously thinking that'd be more like 98 to 100 as opposed to 94 to 96. And even then, the command, he was throwing more strikes, but the command wasn't great. So getting his body into a position where he can consistently command the fastball, maybe find some ways to tinker with it to get some more life on it. But at the end of the day, like, as long as the fastball is at least commanded and the velocity is back a little bit more, that's at least the bare minimum of what he needs to get the splitter set up to be an effective pitch. So yeah, obviously, like, you looked at it, the splitter is a unique pitch, but it hasn't performed as well as it probably should, just because the other stuff hasn't been nearly good enough. So I think Dave Roberts kind of even said like that no one was expecting him to go wire to wire this season, just considering he was coming off a season where he threw 111 innings, has had some injury stuff over the years. So this is I'm sure that there's something to the shoulder bothering him and something like that, and I'm sure that was a contributing factor, but also this is a chance to sort of shut him down, start from scratch, and maybe have more of the actual development side as opposed to kind of forcing him to be out there and figure it out with all the expectations that sort of come with this team.
Marcus, I know you had a follow-up, and then we can get into some chat questions about Kershaw and some pitchers, additional pitchers as well.
Oh, well, actually, I was just going to follow up with Kershaw, too, because I'm sure that's kind of the top of mind for a lot of folks. He's coming back, expected to make his debut on Saturday. Expectations for him at this point in his career. I mean, he's kind of been a 5-inning guy at best. I don't imagine that thought process changes with him, does it?
No, I feel like there's going to be a lot of inherent trust in him, sort of seeing how he looks and his ability to kind of navigate through lineups. And like, I'm sure there'll be times where he goes 6, and because he's so efficient, he knows how to be so efficient. I think he's going to look pretty good, honestly. I do think that. Like you look at what he looked like before the toe really started bothering him last year. He was looking like vintage Kershaw. Like, he was looking like a guy who was going to be a guy that the Dodgers leaned on the rest of that stretch run, just because he just knows how to pitch. Like, it's hard to like really sort of specify that. Like, he just he knows how to command the fastball. He knows how to go east, west, north, south with it. He knows how to play the slider off of it. Doesn't really matter what the velocity is at, because he just finds a way to kind of get enough of a gap to keep hitters off balance. I mean, I've seen this guy on half a shoulder pitch in Miami and still go like 6 innings while clearly having no command, no breaking ball, and the velocity was like 87, 88, and he was still effective. Like, he is such a competitor that as long as the toe and knee hold up, like he said, like the shoulder feels so good, he'd be wasting it if he wasn't still pitching. So that's something where I do feel like he's going to look pretty good. I don't know how many starts he's going to be able to make or anything like that, but like, I do feel like when he's out there, he's going to look a lot like the version of Kershaw we've seen the last few years.
See, and I would love to see that. And I think everybody would. He's a Hall of Famer. What he's done for this organization is amazing. How much do you actually see? How far do you actually see him going? Because I've always thought that this is like he's going to get his 3,000 strikeouts and go as long as he possibly can. But by the time it gets to the postseason, we probably shouldn't be relying on Kershaw, but kind of enjoy what we're getting from him for the regular season, especially coming up now in May. It just kind of feels that way to me. I don't know if you see it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think it depends on like who's available, who's around, everything like that. I think that's always kind of the thing. I think he's a guy who he's really important to them right now, and I think they're gonna like. I don't think anyone anticipated him being as important, but it seems like every single year it's kind of in this spot where like he comes back and all of a sudden like, oh, the rotation's really leaning on Clayton Kershaw again. But this is kind of the role he's kind of been in, and obviously we'll see like what the timeline like kind of looks like for a Blake Snell, a Tyler Glass now and stuff like that. But if he's a guy who's sort of helping you get through the season, or if he's a guy who you're leaning on over the course of the season. Like, he's a guy who has, when he's been out there, has been effective, and I think there's a lot of inherent trust there. And obviously, milestones within reach, but like, he's a guy who's a competitor. I think he kind of saw, like, I think he enjoyed being part of last year's World Series run, but he also has said, like, I'm glad I was here for it. I didn't really feel like I was part of it. And I think there's something in him that wants to sort of be part of it this time.
Kershaw Day is back, guys. So, Fabian, I had to ask, courtesy of the chat, I believe, excuse me, Justin Lamas there. You mentioned the two names, Snell, Glasnow. I'm curious where the organization stands in terms of how they feel about these two pitchers going forward. I mean, is there some sort of disappointment, or are they in a comfortable state where they feel that this is the typical early IL stint that you can get out of those two?
I think they know that they signed these guys for October. At the end of the day, like, you give Tyler Glasnow that extension, you're hoping he's healthy for like 2 or 3 Octobers. Like, it was basically what you're paying for. Is for him to be that type of guy peaking at the most important time of the year. I think it's probably a similar thing to Snell. I think they're maybe hoping for him to be more of a workhorse, and which is still possible. Obviously, like, it was like this was a shoulder thing that kind of popped up, and I think they kind of, especially once he went to go throw a second bullpen, and he still kind of felt something in the shoulder. I think they kind of moved into the bucket like, hey, take your time. Like, if you feel anything, we are not going to throw you, just because we know like how important you are later on. I think you can sort of say that with a lot of these pitchers. And obviously, a lot of these IL stints, like, the injuries kind of pile up and everything like that. But I think there's some of it where, like, obviously there's something that the organization has to look into when it comes to keeping guys healthy. And I think they kind of already have had that internal audit. But I also think that there's something to the way the Dodgers are kind of built. They are more willing probably than most teams to be like, hey, if you're feeling anything, you're going on the IL because we want to kind of play the long game. And they feel like they can play the long game with all these guys. And Snell and Glasnow kind of fit that bucket. We kind of like, all right, we can afford to like take these months of April and May and have enough depth and have enough talent to still be in a good spot for when you come back and really have you be at your best, instead of having you be pushing through things and then maybe all of a sudden the wheels fall off in October. Like, that's sort of the hope. And that's sort of the way that they're kind of viewing it. Obviously, like, you can sort of look at it like, all right, this is maybe a more competitive division than people originally thought. Like, maybe that's kind of foolish thinking, but like, that's sort of the way the Dodgers have kind of approached things the last few years. I think especially with guys like Glasnow and Snell, who they've invested this much in, I don't think they want to push them through regular seasons as much as having them ready to go kind of peaking in October.
Yeah, for sure. I know obviously they're taking the long view. We get impatient and we always want to know what's going on right now. What we do know going on right now, though, the Dodgers do have another game tonight. They will try and win the rubber game of the series against the A's after getting a 9-3 victory last night. We will see the Major League debut of Dalton rushing, so look forward to that as well. And we're looking forward to reading about it in The Athletic, courtesy of Fabian Ardaya tomorrow. Fabian, as always, man, appreciate the time. Thanks for stopping by. Hopefully we'll get you again at some point during the season.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Fabian. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks everybody, of course, as always, in the chat. Thanks to LAX for helping us put this together as well. Stick around on the ESPN LA YouTube channel. Travis and DeMarco coming up next tomorrow. Back for version of the Blue Review, 8:30 to 8:55. Spiegel will be with us as always on a Friday as well, and ideally talking about a Dodgers series win. But that'll do it for this edition of the Blue Review, presented by LAX. For Fabian Ardaya, for Parker Bell, and for Greg Bergman, I'm Marcus Grant. Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you, Fabian.